Manager insists I do my job properly. Happy to comply, sir. Preface. In early 2020 I was hired under the title Assistant Manager at a local automotive shop. We mainly sold tires, if you're American, and alloy wheels for passenger vehicles. The company owned several stores. I reported directly to my manager, who then reported to the owner of the company. Shortly after I was hired, I noticed the behavior of the manager was far from professional. He would constantly mock and berate me for being the new guy. I believe part of this was jealousy and insecurity on his part, as I ended up recording more sales under my name within the first few months. He would also knock off work early and start drinking beer whilst the rest of us continued to work. I remember when he found out that I participated in MMA training sessions after work, he tried to goad me into a fight for his own amusement. Clearly this guy didn't like me, and I was starting to get the feeling that he was trying to get me to snap or lose my cool, and as a result, my employment. I became even more certain of that with what happened next. Story. During the few months that I had worked there, I had noticed that our takings for the day and sales records did not match. I would often spend half an hour to an hour after work trying to figure out where the errors were coming from, whilst the manager would simply throw his hands in the air and exclaim that he had no idea how this was happening. The recurring issue seemed to be that our cash takings had been recorded incorrectly. There would sometimes be an excess amount of cash that didn't match up to what was recorded on our sales/invoicing software. Other times, there would be less. I was, at the time, an accounting student studying towards my bachelor's degree. I was already suspicious of the cash being out each day. However, given how the manager had been treating me up until this point, I was concerned that any complaint would somehow be twisted and used against me. And boy was I right. Several weeks later my manager took some time off. During this time I managed a personal record in store sales, and also noticed something interesting: the cash was never out at the end of each shift. I reported this directly to the owner of the company. Given I was acting manager during the time my manager was away, I was expected to report to the owner every day, and explained what had been occurring whilst the manager was there. In all honesty, I was hopeful that the owner would be having a word with the manager about the discrepancies. However, I was also weary, as I believed once the owner spoke to my manager, that the manager will immediately know it was me who reported this. When the manager returned to work, he immediately approached me with a disgruntled look on his face. "I've spoken with the owner. You tried to blame me for the discrepancies? You should focus on doing your job properly, then this wouldn't happen." I was quite taken aback by how angry he was, though I wasn't surprised that he twisted it and tried to place blame on me. Given his reaction, I'm even more suspicious at this point. He wants me to do my job properly, eh? Malicious compliance ensues. That same week, I got to work. I started paying attention to what customers were paying when they were dealing with my manager. Behind his back, I began examining all of his sale transactions and invoices with a fine comb. As the days rolled by, I started to find evidence of his dishonesty. When it came to a few cash sales, my manager was doing the following. Example. Would tell the customer the price is $200 if he pays cash. Would discount the price by $50 in the sales/invoicing software. Would put the extra cash into the till and record a $150 cash sale. Before we did the cash up at the end of the day, he would sneakily pocket this extra cash whilst no one was around. Though he was very foolish, as he clearly couldn't remember the exact amount he had swindled. Hence why the cash would be up some days, didn't swindle enough, or the cash would be down, swindled too much. End. I took scene shots of the discounts he had been giving on sales and sent them to the business owner, along with a report. A report with a detailed description of my findings. The report also showed that on all days he wasn't there for the cash count, there was no variance. When he was there, well, the owner was infuriated. This man had been his trusted employee for years. The owner was so infuriated, in fact, that he ordered my manager do a mandatory drug test, pee in a cup style, on the same day he found out. And no surprises. He failed. Turns out the manager had quite the meth habit. This was most likely his sole motive for stealing cash, and the owner was beside himself. We operate machinery every day in this store, and so the thought of a manager walking around high as a kite wouldn't sit well with any health and safety professional. In fact, it could have landed the owner in serious legal trouble if any accident or injury occurred under this manager's watch. The manager was terminated immediately for violation of his contract, and was later taken to court by the owner in an attempt to recover the stolen funds. Safe to say, I was promoted to store manager position shortly after his termination. I bet the manager and owner have some kind of history. The immediate drug test shows that the owner knew exactly what to look for. Hoisted by his own petard. I have a friend called Kerry who just broke a story to me. Not sure if it's petty or pro-revenge, or even malicious compliance, but here it is. Done on phone, and autocorrupt hates me. TL, doctor at the end. The cast, names have been changed to protect identities. Kerry, my friend, and the heroine of the story. Sharon, the secretary with loose morals. Roger, IT manager and villain of the story. Ivan, the CEO and company owner, also owner of 3 or so other small companies, one of which was in the same office block. Olivia, Roger's wife. Kerry works for a small IT company as a programmer and web designer along with about 8 others, including her manager and her newest colleague, Sharon the secretary. Roger is a womanizing rogue who makes frequent moderately offensive comments about women, customers and staff, like he has no brain-mouth filter. Sharon is, as Kerry puts it, an upwardly mobile skank who will literally, yes, actually, blow the boss if he buys her new shoes, so. Boner for a bonus. And she has had a bonus, just not for productivity. The first Kerry knew about Sharon's behavior was late one Saturday afternoon, when everyone had left for the weekend, except Kerry as she had a project. She was beavering away at her desk in a nearly silent office when she heard a squeal. She immediately got up to investigate, and found her boss's door ajar. She heard another squeal, and walked in. Finding Sharon bent over the desk with her skirt hitched up above her hips, her boss, trousers round his ankles, balls deep behind her. Yes, this is artistic license, but that's how she described it. Roger's expression indicated fury and embarrassment and he sounded to be mid-nut. Sharon had an expression like the cat that had the cream, with no pun intended. She certainly didn't seem bothered about being caught. Roger recovers his composure, puts his trousers back on and called Kerry back into the room, she hadn't stopped to watch, and threatened to fire her if she let slip what she'd seen. The instruction was tell nobody. Act like it never happened. It's important at this point to mention that this was at the height of COVID, and they were looking at the possibility of reducing staff numbers, something which fortunately never happened, but at the time of this story, nobody was sure. Kerry kept quiet. Ooh, that's nice alliteration. Roger would occasionally remember that she knew what he was up to, and would give her dirty looks, but little more was said. Sharon and Roger were still having regular sex at work, and Sharon was getting the bonuses that the team should have received. She was also receiving bonus, but nobody would have felt jealous had they known. One Saturday, about 6 months after the initial shock discovery, an opportunity for revenge, and technically malicious compliance, presented itself. Olivia, Roger's wife, popped in. The staff was still there, and the office was busy and a bit noisy. Roger had excused himself to his office with Sharon early as he knew his wife would be in later to meet him and wanted to get his end away before she arrived. She was early. Olivia was standing at Sharon's desk. Sharon was the secretary, after all, and Kerry saw an opportunity. She offered to help, in the absence of the secretary, and Olivia asked to see Roger. Kerry obliged. The next bit is a little vague, as Kerry skipped some details, but, apparently, she knows how to get past the lock on his office door, like the door frame is a little too big, and that's the vague bit. Kerry was able to open the door as if it wasn't locked, and hold it open for Olivia, who walked in to see her husband screwing the secretary from behind. Olivia's eruption was one of incandescent fury, which caused Roger's excuses to melt away. He was trying to explain that it wasn't what it looked like while pulling his trousers up. Sharon, meanwhile, had tried to discreetly leave, but Olivia had turned her full wrath on Sharon's direction, so Sharon excused herself by asking Roger why he'd never told her he was married. He had actually told her, but the ruse worked. Roger stared daggers at Kerry, but she told him that she'd done as he asked. She had never told anyone, and had acted as if it had never happened. Just as he demanded. Olivia asked what she meant, and she explained in painful detail what had been going on. With Olivia screaming blue murder at Roger, nobody heard the big boss, Ivan, arrive. He must have heard the ruckus and come to investigate. At this point, he'd heard enough from outside the office, and Kerry was asked to leave. Roger doesn't work there anymore, and neither does Sharon. Sharon was dismissed for gross misconduct, and Roger is awaiting a court date, something about fraud or embezzlement or something. Details are sketchy here. No information about his marriage. Sorry. Kerry is still at the company, but now works as an assistant manager to a newly appointed female manager. TL, Dr. Manager screws around and threatens staff to keep it secret. Staff does exactly as told. Manager gets caught, humiliated and fired. This is pro-revenge and malicious compliance. She was told to act as if it never happened, so she did exactly that, And in doing so they caught Roger rogering. Hey! I love you. Thanks for watching. I hoped you enjoyed this Reddit audio story. It would mean a lot to me if you could like and subscribe, or better yet, leave a comment about one of the stories. Thanks, and I hope you have a wonderfully fantastic day. XOXO.